picked up the check, looked at it, and wiped the bottom of his shoe with it. That was what happened. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration for effect. Branch manager Curtis Pelham of Meridian First Bank's Lakeview location picked up a certified check made out for $10 million, read the name on it, Celeste Armand, looked at the woman standing across his desk in a plain linen blazer, and then, with the slow deliberateness of a man who has never once been told he couldn't, turned the check over and dragged it across the sole of his dress shoe. Twice. He set it back on the desk. Smoothed. He smiled at her. 14 people in that branch, tellers, loan officers, 2 customers at the counter, watched him do it. Not one of them spoke. Celeste Armand looked at the check sitting on the desk between them, and then looked at Curtis Pelham with an expression so controlled, so completely unreadable, that one of the tellers later said it was the most frightening thing she had ever seen in a professional setting. What Curtis Pelham did not know, in 40 minutes the CEO of Meridian First Bank would walk through that branch's glass doors. He came to Lakeview every second Thursday. He always had. And today was the second Thursday. 3 years earlier, Celeste Armand had walked into a bank for the first time in her adult life with something other than a paycheck. She had grown up in Port Sulphur, Louisiana, a small coastal community where the bayou ran brown and slow behind the houses, and the economy had been built on fishing and oil refinery work, and the particular resilience of people who had rebuilt after storms, and were prepared, always, to rebuild again. Her mother Josephine had cleaned houses for 22 years. Her father Gerald had worked the late shift at a chemical plant 40 minutes up the highway. They had owned their home outright by the time Celeste was 12, bought modest, paid down stubbornly, 1 extra payment a year for 11 years, and this fact, this deed in a manila envelope in the fireproof box under her parents' bed, had shaped Celeste's understanding of money more profoundly than anything she would later learn in any classroom. Ownership meant something. Paper meant something. You did not let either be disrespected. She had left Port Sulphur at 18 on a full academic scholarship to Xavier University in New Orleans, where she studied finance and economics and graduated with the kind of clarity of purpose that comes from knowing exactly why the work matters. She spent 3 years at an investment firm in Atlanta, learning the industry from the inside, who the money moved for, who it moved past, and why. She left at 26 and started her own private wealth management firm in a 1-room office in the West End with a second-hand desk and a printer that jammed every third job, and 2 clients she had brought with her from the old firm. 7 years later, the firm managed assets for 63 clients. The West End office had become a full floor of a building on Peachtree. She had 11 employees. She had not taken a salary above the median for her industry until the firm crossed its 5th year. Every dollar above that had gone back into growth, back into her people, or back into the Port Sulphur Community Foundation she had established in her parents' names. She was 33 years old. She drove a sensible car and wore linen and did not keep a Birkin bag or a Rolex because she had decided early that she wanted to be taken seriously for what she understood, not what she displayed. The $10 million check represented the closing disbursement from the estate of a client who had trusted her firm for 5 years. A retired engineer named Howard Briggs, who had no heirs and had decided, after long conversation with Celeste, to leave the majority of his estate to 3 community development organizations in the city. Celeste was the executor. The check was made out to her firm's escrow account, and she was depositing it at Meridian First because Meridian held the estate's existing accounts and the transfer was cleanest done there. She had an appointment. She had called ahead. She had brought the certified check, the estate documentation, and a letter from the probate court. She had done everything right. Curtis Pelham had managed the Lakeview branch of Meridian First Bank for 9 years. In that time, the branch had consistently met its quarterly targets, which Pelham considered the primary evidence that he was doing his job correctly. He had a firm handshake, an American flag pin on his lapel, and a framed photograph on his desk of himself with the regional VP at the previous year's awards dinner, both of them holding a plaque. He played golf on Saturdays at the Whitmore Club and knew 3 sitting city council members by first name. He had grown up in a suburb 40 minutes north of the city in a house with a finished basement and a 2-car garage, attended a state school on a partial scholarship, and understood the financial services industry with a particular confidence of a man who had never been on the wrong side of it. He had opinions about clients, not policies. Opinions, the informal kind, the kind that had never been written down anywhere and therefore could not be reviewed. He had opinions about who was wasting his time and who wasn't, about which accounts were worth the full-service treatment and which could be handled at the window, about which people who walked through the branch's glass doors looked like the kind of people who belonged there. When Celeste Armand arrived at 2 p.m. for her appointment, Pelham was behind his desk eating a sandwich. He looked at her through the glass wall of his office. He looked at the linen blazer, the sensible shoes, the leather portfolio under her arm. He did not see wealth. He did not see an executor. He took a slow, deliberate bite of his sandwich, finished chewing, and then waved her in, without rising, without extending a hand. She sat down. She placed the portfolio on the desk. She introduced herself and the purpose of the transaction clearly and precisely. He listened in the way people listen when they have already decided the answer is no, technically present, processing nothing. He asked her where she banked personally. Then he asked who the account holder was, even though she had just explained that she was the executor. Then he asked whether she had a Meridian account herself. And when she said no, he leaned back in his chair and said that large estate transfers typically required an established relationship with the institution. She placed the probate letter on the desk. He glanced at it. He did not pick it up. She placed the certified check on top of the probate letter, $10 million, certified by the issuing bank, legally unambiguous. Curtis Pelham looked at the check. He looked at Celeste. Then he reached forward, picked it up, turned it over, and wiped the bottom of his right shoe with it. Slow, deliberate, smiling. He set it back on the desk. "I'll need to consult with my regional manager," he said, as if nothing had happened. "These things take time. Let's pause here for a moment, because what happens next has two parts, and both of them matter. The first part is what Celeste Armand did. She did not raise her voice. She did not pick up the check. She placed both hands flat on the surface of the desk, looked at Curtis Pelham at a distance of approximately 3 feet, and spoke in a register so quiet and precise that the loan officer in the adjacent cubicle, who had been trying not to watch, later said she had never heard anyone deliver a threat in a tone that calm. "I'm going to ask you to put that conversation with your regional manager on hold," Celeste said. "You're going to want to be available in the next 30 minutes. Is that right?" "That's right." She picked up the check, not quickly, not with any display, just picked it up as one retrieves a document, and set it back in her portfolio. She stood. "I'll wait in the lobby." She sat in one of the leather chairs near the door. She took out her phone and made a call. She spoke for approximately 4 minutes. Then she sat with her hands folded in her lap and waited. The second part is what arrived 40 minutes later. His name was Gerald Marsh, and he was the CEO of Meridian First Bank. 61 years old, 38 years in financial services. He had built Meridian from a regional institution with 4 branches into a 43-branch operation with assets under management in the billions, and he had done it through a specific and genuinely held philosophy: that the trust clients placed in a financial institution was not a marketing proposition, but a moral obligation, and that any breach of it was a direct threat to everything else. This was not public relations language. It was the reason he still visited each branch in person on a rotating schedule, showing up unannounced on the branch's regular days, walking the floor, talking to tellers, sitting in on client meetings when he was invited. Lakeview was his second, Thursday branch. He came through the glass doors at 2:47 p.m. He saw Celeste Armand in the lobby chair almost immediately, partly because she was there, visibly waiting. In the particular composed stillness of someone who has been wronged and is not going anywhere, and partly because his assistant, who had taken Celeste's call 40 minutes earlier and recognized her name from a financial industry contact list that Gerald Marsh maintained personally, had texted him 2 minutes before he arrived. "Celeste Armand is in your Lakeview lobby. You need to hear what happened before you go in." He had read the text in the car. His driver had noticed in the rearview mirror that he did not put the phone down for the rest of the ride. He walked in. He crossed directly to where Celeste was sitting. He extended his hand and said his name, as if she might not know it, because that was the kind of person he was. She shook it and told him, in 3 sentences, what had happened. She didn't embellish. She didn't perform distress. She told him what she had seen, what had been done, what she had in her portfolio, and what she needed accomplished that afternoon. Then she looked at him and waited. Gerald Marsh's face had gone very still. He asked one question. The check is certified and documented through the probate court, she said. She opened the portfolio and placed both documents on the seat between them. He looked at them for a moment. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to Curtis Pelham's office without stopping at the front desk, without greeting the staff, without any of the warm, unhurried routine his branch visits usually followed. He knocked once on the glass wall, a single sharp knock, and opened the door. The staff of the Lakeview branch had a clear sight line to Curtis Pelham's office from the teller area, the loan officer cubicles, and the waiting area, and every single one of them was watching. Nobody had said anything since Celeste Armand sat down in the lobby chair. Not to her, not to each other. The branch had continued operating with the surface mechanics of a normal afternoon. Transactions processed, phones answered, but underneath that surface, every person on the floor had been waiting in the specific collective tension of people who know something is unresolved and cannot look away. They watched Gerald Marsh close Pelham's office door. They could not hear the conversation. The glass walls of the office were not soundproofed, but the branch's ambient noise was enough to blur the words. What they could see was this: Gerald Marsh, standing, Curtis Pelham, rising from his chair, expression shifting from surprise to something approaching concern. Marsh saying something, Pelham's hands moving, not aggressively, the gesture of someone beginning an explanation. Marsh's expression, unmoving. Pelham gesturing again. Marsh raising one hand. Not dramatically, just a clean, flat stop that required no volume to be absolutely clear. The conversation lasted 6 minutes. When Gerald Marsh opened the office door, he held it for a moment and said at a volume the branch could hear 4 words. You're done here, Curtis. Then he walked back to the lobby. He sat down across from Celeste Armand. He apologized the way people apologize when they mean it and are not wrapping it in language designed to reduce liability. Directly, specifically, without qualification. He told her what would happen next. The transaction would be processed that afternoon, personally overseen by the branch's senior operations manager, with no further obstruction. The documentation would be filed. The transfer would be completed before close of business. He also told her that effective immediately, Curtis Pelham was being placed on administrative leave pending a formal conduct review, that the regional manager who supervised Lakeview had been contacted, that this branch's client intake procedures would be reviewed within the week. Celeste listened. She asked 2 questions about the transaction timeline. He answered them. She thanked him. She did not say anything about what had been done to the check. She did not need to. He had already understood that the check was not the point. The check could be reissued. The point was that a woman had walked into his institution with a certified legal instrument and the correct documentation, had asked for a standard service, and had been treated as though she did not belong in the room. That was the point. It was the only point. The transaction process at 4:18 p.m. Celeste Armand walked out of the Lakeview branch at 4:31 through the same glass doors she had entered 3 hours earlier. The afternoon light was low and gold across the parking lot. She sat in her car for a moment with the portfolio on the passenger seat and the probate documents filed and the transfer complete, and she allowed herself the specific private satisfaction of a person who has been tested against their own standards and not found wanting. She drove back to the Peachtree office. She had a 5 o'clock call. Curtis Pelham's administrative leave became a termination 12 days later, following the conduct review, which had surfaced 3 previous client complaints, 2 of them formal, 1 informal, that had been filed, noted, and not acted upon over the preceding 4 years. The regional manager who had supervised Lakeview during that period requested early retirement. It was accepted. A compliance audit of the Lakeview branch, ordered by Gerald Marsh and conducted over the following 3 weeks, found 4 additional instances of differential service standards in the branch's records, cases where the documentation trail suggested that clients had received meaningfully different treatment based on criteria that had no legitimate underwriting basis. 3 of those clients were contacted directly by the bank with formal apologies. 1 accepted, 2 did not respond, All three received full remediation of any fees or service delays they had incurred. Meridian First's board of directors, at Gerald Marsh's recommendation, established a client equity review panel that operated independently of the branch management structure. It was funded, staffed, and given actual authority, the kind that could trigger audits and direct remediation without requiring a CEO to walk through a branch door first. Gerald Marsh wrote the mandate for that panel himself. He kept a copy of it in his desk drawer. He had read it every morning for the past year, not because he needed the reminder, but because he believed that the things that matter are the things you return to. 3 months after the afternoon at the Lakeview branch, Celeste Armand sat in her Peachtree office for a 9 a.m. meeting with a new client, a young woman, 28 years old, first-generation college graduate, 2 years into building a financial services startup in the West End. She had found Celeste through a mutual contact. She was nervous in the specific, careful way of someone who has worked very hard to be in a room and is aware of it. Celeste recognized that particular caution immediately. She had lived in it herself. She poured 2 cups of coffee from the carafe on the credenza, the good coffee, the kind she served to everyone who sat across from her, and she said, "Tell me what you're building," the young woman told her. Celeste listened the way she always listened, completely, without interrupting, tracking everything. She asked 3 questions. The young woman answered them with a precision and a depth that confirmed very quickly that she knew exactly what she was building and why. At the end of the meeting, Celeste opened a folder on her desk. "I'd like to take you on as a client," she said. "Here's what that looks like from our side." She looked at Celeste. She started to say something and stopped, and then started again. "I didn't think," she said. "I mean, I hoped, but I wasn't sure if you prepared," Celeste said. "You knew your numbers, you asked the right questions." She met her eyes. "That's what it takes to be in this room. That's the only thing." The young woman nodded. She took the folder. She came back the following Tuesday with signed documents and a business plan that Celeste read cover to cover that evening, alone in the office after everyone else had gone home, with the city lights coming through the tall windows and a cup of the good coffee cooling beside her. She read it carefully, completely, the way her parents had taught her to treat any piece of paper that had someone's future written on it. Paper meant something. She had always known that. She made 3 notes in the margin, set the plan aside, and went home. The next morning, she was back at her desk at 7:45. She had work to do. She always did.